Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the 50/50 Women on Boards Portland, Oregon conversation on board diversity. I'm Peggy McGuire, president of the Cambia Health Foundation.
And I'm Pamela Nefer-Kara, founder and principal of Elmira Street Associates.
We are delighted to be your co-chairs for today's event, and we are so happy to welcome you all here today to discuss how we can lead the way to diverse and gender-balanced boards.
We're all here because we know the importance of advocating for diversity at the highest levels of leadership and the value of mentorship in preparing more candidates for the boardroom. The more our boardrooms reflect our community at large, the more effectively boards will operate, which is desirable for all of their stakeholders and for their bottom line.
That's why events like the one we're hosting here today are so important. Conversations like this one are happening across the country and around the globe. And we want to take a moment to thank the team who put this event together and our local sponsors. You see them listed on your screen: Cambia Health Solution, Marsh, Greenbrier, and Northwest Natural. We'd also like to thank our global sponsors. I won't read them all out to you, but you'll see them listed on your screen. And we want to also, on behalf of Pamela and myself, extend a very special thank you to our project manager for this event, Melissa Krzyminski, and also our leadership committee members. You see them here on your screen. These folks work together tirelessly to put together the event that you will be participating in today. So thank you, Michelle, Jillian, Trish, and Bonnie. We appreciate everything you did to get ready for today. Thank you.
Yes, a definite thank you to our leadership committee. And speaking of our committee, one of our members, Trish Garner, specifically asked us to mention to you that a bill requiring publicly held corporations to have a minimum number of women and people of color on their board of directors is planned for introduction in the 2023 session of the Oregon legislature. A number of other states, including California and Washington, have enacted similar laws to great effect. If you'd like to learn more, please reach out to Trish Gardner. And Trish, go ahead and share your contact info in the chat so folks know how to reach you. Now, before we hear from our phenomenal VIP panel, it is my pleasure today to introduce Betsy Berkemer-Creder, the CEO of 50/50 Women on Boards. Betsy is going to share more about the national landscape of diversity and gender balance on corporate boards. However, we do ask that you hold your questions during this live portion of our broadcast and save them for the breakout sessions, since we have so many compelling speakers and we only have an hour to hear from them. Betsy, welcome to Portland.
Hey, thank you very much, Pamela and Peggy. It's such a pleasure to be in Portland today for the Portland conversation on board diversity. I am Betsy Berkemer-Creder. I'm the CEO of 50/50 Women on Boards, and our goal is to achieve 50% of the board seats for women, half men, half women, on every corporate board in the U.S. and globally if we can. And then our goal is also that 20% of all board seats will be held by women of color. So we are going to share with you how far we've come and how far we still have to go. Thank you, Peggy and Pamela, for your work and the leadership committee to put on the event here in Portland. And we're one of 30 events globally that are happening last week and this week in our series, attended by more than 6,000 people around the globe. We had new international events this year, including Athens, Greece, and Toronto, adding to our other internationals in London, Mexico City, and Madrid. Madrid was this morning, as a matter of fact. So I'd like to let you know that quarterly and annually, women at 50/50 Women on Boards uses the data provided by our partner Equilar to release our Gender Diversity Index report. And we analyze the percentage of women on boards nationwide by state and by industry sector. We also report on the percentage of women selected for new board seats. And based on those who I self-identify, we report on race and ethnicity of all directors. You can find our Gender Diversity Index report on our website, 5050wob.com. So let's look at the year-over-year progress in the U.S. and in Oregon. Nationwide, please refer to the bottom line here. We are delighted that nationwide we have achieved a level higher than ever before in history, and that is 25.6% of all board seats in the Russell 3000, which is 3,000 companies, nearly 3,000 directors. 7,000 or almost 7,000 of those seats are held by women, and that is 25%. That is a significant increase since last year, 3 points, and which is the largest year-over-year increase in the last 5 years. So we're at the halfway mark to the day when women will hold 50% of the board seats in the U.S. We don't know how soon that will be, but we're going to work on it. Whether it's 5 or 10 years, we're definitely going to make it with your help. So next slide is about Oregon. In Oregon, you are doing very well. The bottom line, as you'll see, 29.6% of the Russell 3000 companies in Oregon women hold 29.6% of those board seats in Oregon, which is moving up definitely on the number of board seats, and tracking with 34 women who serve on boards this year. Our statistics are updated quarterly, and these are as of June 30th. So the next slide is national. Nationally, talking about companies and how companies rank in the U.S., we are delighted that 7% of all companies in the Russell 3000 are already gender balanced. Now, that may not sound it may not sound like a lot, but it's on the way, and it shows that this can be done. And the next line is those companies that have 3+ women on their boards, which is a significant increase nationwide over last year. And then the 3 categories below are 2, 1, and 0 women, where they are decreasing, fortunately, as more and more women are moving into the 3+ and even gender balance categories. And you'll see that the bottom number there is going down, which it should be, and where there are only 4% of the companies in the nation that don't have any women, and that's decreased from 7% last year. And in Oregon, the company rankings are, we don't have any gender balanced. Yes, we do. We didn't have gender balanced companies last year, but we have 8% gender balanced companies this year, including the Schnitzer Steel, which you're going to hear about shortly. But we're so proud that Oregon is moving in the right direction. And we've reduced from last year to 38% of women on boards. Not sure why, but hopefully we'll be able to, of the 3 companies that have 3+ women on their boards, but we'll be able to increase that in the year ahead. And the best number on that on this slide is that in Oregon, no companies remain with no women on boards, and it was 15% of companies last year. So really moving in the right direction. Lastly, how many women will it take to achieve gender balance on the company boards in Oregon? Our estimate is between 20 and 35, and 20% is the lower number based on whether a woman takes the seat of a man, or a man retires and a woman is replacing his seat. or if most boards do, add a seat to their boards. And that would require 35 women in Oregon to achieve gender balance. Now, that's not very many, Oregon. You could be leading in the country in the next year. We're expecting that of you, as a matter of fact. And regarding racial and ethnic diversity on corporate boards, 17% of corporate directors report their racial or ethnic background. So the vast majority don't report, 89%. But based on the statistics from Equilar that we track, only 12% of all directors are people of color. And those are self-reported. So you'll see that men of color occupied 7% of the Russell 3000 board seats nationwide. Women of color, only 4%. Still a long way to go. And what we request is that we encourage board directors to self-identify their racial and ethnic background by filling out their Equilar Board Edge profile, which you'll see in your chat. And that will allow Equilar and 50/50 Women on Boards to assess and develop solutions for underrepresented groups, because we certainly want to be able to report the statistics. And then that last slide share with you is the national breakdown of race and ethnicity on board in a very graphic picture here. You'll see how the various racial backgrounds are represented on corporate boards now. The numbers are very low compared to the Caucasian and the unreported. By that I mean unself-identified directors. So long way to go, but we're on the way. So thanks for being here today, and I'd like to turn the microphone back over to Pamela and Peggy.
Thank you so much, Betsy. Wonderful overview, and we appreciate the data-driven approach that you're taking. Thank you for that. It's my great pleasure now to introduce our amazing VIP panel. I want to start by welcoming Karen Lee. Karen is the Chief Executive Officer of Pioneer Human Services, and she serves on the boards of Northwest Natural Holding Company and Lease Crutcher Lewis. Next, please welcome Mark Gans. Mark is the retired CEO of Cambia Health Solutions, and he serves on the corporate board of Portland General Electric. Next, please welcome Dr. Soo-Jae Lee. Soo-Jae is the Dean of the College of Engineering at UC Berkeley, and she is on the Intel board. Now I'd like to welcome Mac Hogans. Mac is the president and CEO of Mac Hogans LLC Consulting Services. He's a retired senior vice president from Weyerhaeuser, and he served on many corporate boards, including Boise Cascade Company, and he's a past member of the U.S. Bank Board and Cambia Health Solutions Board. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to welcome Tamara Lundgren. Tamara is the chairman and CEO of Schnitzer Steel Industries, and she serves on the boards of Ryder System Inc. and the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. And welcome all of you, and thank you so much for being here and being part of this conversation. And I do mean conversation. I want this to be interactive, and so I invite you to comment on each other's responses, and also feel free to ask each other questions if there's something you'd like to know. But let's start. I'll launch the opening question here, and this is really about your personal story. And I want to start with you, Soo-Jae, and ask you to tell us about your first corporate board. Why did you want to serve on that board, and how did you evaluate that board service opportunity?
Great. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story. My very first corporate board was actually Intel. And the way it came about is that, Intel is a leading semiconductor company. And one of the board members was thinking of or planning to retire, and he turned out to be one of my former PhD advisors. And he was the only person on the board at the time with deep technical expertise in semiconductors. And so this is the story of, a woman replacing a man on the board. But my area of expertise for decades had been in semiconductor devices and technology. Intel has partnered with me for many years in advancing the state of the art. And so really I was brought on board primarily for my technical expertise to make sure that there was some strong technical expertise on the board directly relevant to the company's business. But I also had some leadership experience, not only as Dean of Engineering, but formerly as Vice Provost for the University of California, Berkeley, where I was in charge of international partnerships. So I had leadership experience, a view into international partnerships, as well as deep technical expertise. Now, the reason why I thought it was interesting, because as an engineer, of course, we're always looking to expand our horizons, learning new things. And so I was looking at the composition of the board. There are really a lot of impressive leaders and former leaders on the board. So I thought I could learn a lot. And indeed, after I joined the board over the past 5 years, I've learned a lot more than I could have ever imagined about what it takes to actually run a successful semiconductor business, learn a lot about leadership, about business and finance and so on and so forth. So it's really been a good learning experience. And I do think that I have been able to contribute also as a board member. We've actually gone through, multiple leadership transitions, including on the board. The board is almost entirely new since I've joined 5 years ago. The average term of service on the board today is like 3 years, and we have 4 out of 10 women now who are members of the board. So it has been wonderful to see how the board itself has evolved and how the company has evolved ever since I joined the board 5 years ago.
Thank you for sharing that story. It's fascinating. It sounds like they sought you out for your technical expertise and your leadership skills.
Yes.
Very interesting. Karen, let's turn to you. I'd love to hear about your first experience as a board member and where that journey has taken you.
I worked my way up with respect to board service. My first board was U.S. Bank of Washington with Mac Hogan's, and in banks, a lot of banks are required to have a community board in every state, and U.S. Bank had one, and then I progressed from there. My first fiduciary corporate board is Lease Crutcher Lewis, which is headquartered in Washington, and I was the first outside director with a friend of mine, and so I offer a lot to that board. One of my many jokes with them is like, tick tock, okay, don't make me work too hard on this board, but I certainly, it's a large company today. Some years they have significantly over $1 billion of revenue, and the board is maturing, and I'm helping with that process in many ways. And when the board chair interviewed me, I remember talking to him for about 5 minutes and saying, I think you guys really need the perspective of me and an outside director. So I really enjoy that company quite a bit, and I enjoy that board, and I just enjoy the people. The culture is very similar to my background, which is from a utility. And then my next board, which is publicly traded, is Northwest Natural, which was a sponsor to this event, I'm happy to say. And on that board, I'm the only director from Washington. I'm the only director that has operational experience at a utility. So it's interesting that the different perspectives that you bring depending on the needs of the board. So that's my board journey.
And I wonder if both of you could comment on why you feel board service is important. I can see clearly what you bring to the board, but what do you get from it?
I can take a first stab at answering that question. I think that it's important to make sure that companies evolve to, well, at least for Intel, the technology, the products that Intel produces do shape, our future. And so we want to make sure that, leadership is very inclusive of a diversity of perspectives and designs their products to be beneficial with minimal negative unintended consequences. And that also includes, environmental and social responsibility. So I think it is important to have a diversity of voices and perspectives in the boardroom to help ensure that these influential companies, help to shape a better future for all. That's why I stepped up to serve in that position.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
For me, companies are alive, right? And just like people, their lives, they have ups and downs, and they have challenges, and they have, big wins, and then you're hanging on for your life. And so part of it is just the satisfaction of being a part of a team that's assisting management, lead the organization in good times and in bad. As board members, we're there to assist in transitions, of course, but to give advice, to support the CEO and the senior management leaders in areas where we have expertise, or when we can be a thought partner and they can bounce ideas off of, and certainly to discharge the duties of a board member to ensure that the organization is doing what it says it should do. So it's really satisfying to me to be a part of a team of a great organization that you love the work they do and you love their product, and then the people that you meet along the way. And then you learn from folks like Mac, who's on this call with me. You gain mentors along the way, and I've seen Mark Gantz in his role. Tamara is on a board with me. So you also come in contact with people that know a heck of a lot more, than you do, and it expands your horizons.
Yeah. Peggy, can I add one thing?
Please.
I remember when I first joined my first nonprofit board, I was surprised I did it because I wanted to, provide service. And I was quite surprised that it made me a much better executive. One of the reasons that obviously, we really pushed hard at Cambia to have mid-level people get onto boards, because it actually made them better employees, better leaders inside the company. There's something about being on the other side of the table and from management that gives you a perspective on what matters, to a board, and what accountability looks like, and delivering on promises that you make. And I think that I would just add that as one of maybe the richest reasons for a person to want to serve on a board, is that you become a better executive, a better leader.
Thank you. And thank you both for sharing your personal stories and your journeys. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about our theme today, which is leading the way to diverse and gender balanced boards. Tamara, as the CEO of Schnitzer Steel, you are a member of the only gender balanced board in Oregon.
A group of one.
Good. You stand out here. Could you please share with our audience what practices or ideas you put into place to attract a diverse board?
Absolutely. And thanks very much for inviting me to be here today. And I want to start by saying I don't like to be the only member of a club or a group, so I welcome others to join me here. So my goal was not to achieve 50-50. My goal was really, when I became CEO, was to continue the focus that we had at Schnitzer of a diverse board. In fact, when I joined the board, there were 2 women on the board already, and they termed out, and we started to recruit additional women. And the rule that we put in place, and we started it at the board, and we have now applied it to all leadership positions in our company, which is over 550 leadership positions in our company out of an employee base of around 3,500. And that is the application of the Rooney Rule. And I don't know how many of you know what the Rooney Rule is, but it was created in the early 2000s, I think around 2003. It was named after Dan Rooney, who was the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he put in a rule that fundamentally required that for all, as it related to NFL, to National Football, that all openings for head coaches or senior operations personnel would require a diverse slate. And for them, they were really focused on African-American candidates. And so they required at least one African-American candidate for any head coaching position across the NFL or senior operations lead. And what that did was that grew the pipeline. And what it also did was for the candidates that didn't get the job on their first or second try, each time they interviewed, they learned something. They became better candidates. They learned what they weren't, what they needed to develop, what they were lacking, so that they could navigate it better. We did the same thing at Schnitzer. And what I will say is we've done it at Schnitzer in terms of making sure our slate is diverse, but then we've always picked the best candidate. We've never compromised on quality to take into account diversity statistics, because we don't think that we have to. There are many, many qualified people for board positions out there, and making sure that you're seeing a broad enough pool will naturally lead to, I think, gender diversity and all types of diversity.
Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like you really focused on putting some process markers into place, and then focus on selecting the best candidates through that process, through a broader process.
That's exactly right.
Thank you. Mac, I
Yes.
know you formerly chaired the board of Cambia Health Solutions when Mark served as the CEO, and I watched the two of you work together to build a more diverse and inclusive board. Can you share practically, what you did and why you thought it was important?
Yes, thank you, Peggy. And under Mark's leadership as CEO, Cambia had already instituted and had a very good process in place for increasing diversity on the board. Mark got that, I got it, the search committee got it, the board got it. And I thought that was pretty much a very good process. When I became chair of the board, and speaking with Mark, one of the things I wanted to do was to try to make inclusion successful and on the board as well. And I dedicated a lot of my time to that, working with Mark. And if you think about diversity in its simplest form, it's getting diverse talent within the door. If you think about inclusion, is what do you do with the talent once they are in the door? How do you make effective use of the talent? And from personal experience, I know that a lot of, not all, but some women and some people of color feel like they are not heard in board meetings, that their voices are sometimes ignored and sometimes they feel intimidated. And what I try to do as chair, working with Mark, is to reach out. And as chair, I would sit around and I'd make eye contact and I'd look around and I'd read the body language in the room. And if I saw someone who looked like they were hesitating or someone who looked like they felt intimidated, I would calmly call on them to say, would you like to add Do you have some comment? And so I tried to make it a very safe environment for them to provide, their voice and their voice to be heard, and for their talents to be integrated. I wanted inclusion to become part of the DNA of the organization. And, and the little simple things like during the social face-to-face time, if I would see all of the women huddled together in one group and all the men huddled together in one group, I would go over and insert myself into the conversation as a way of making sure that these were independent choices and not because people felt like they couldn't be part of someone else's group. As CEO, one of the things that Mark did was for some of the dinner events, he would intentionally have name tags so that people would have a chance to interact and to mix and get to know each other. And to me, that is a critical part of that aspect is a critical part. Inclusion is a critical part of the retention of board members. And I applaud Mark for some of the breakthrough moves that he made when he was the CEO at Cambia. And I feel very good about some of the work that we did when I was there. But those are some of the things that I focused on as chair of the board.
Yep.
Thank you, Mac. And thank you for recognizing it's not about the numbers. It's about the inclusion is really key to bringing out the best in people. So thank you. Mark, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I would just underscore what a master Mac was in terms of being able to do that. And he used not only just a genuine warmth and authenticity, but a very good sense of humor. Because one of the things that we really worked on with the board was to blend not only, for us, and Mac and I used to talk about this a lot, is diversity was across all aspects of diversity, including diverse personalities. And so you tended to get some women to men and women both who we would call the fire breathers on the board, and those that were more, would do their thinking internally and always had something really positive, important to say, but sometimes needed to be drawn out. And so it was, Mac was so good at balancing that in the boardroom as the chair, kind of a traffic cop or choreographer, if you will, to make sure that the extroverts on the board with strong personalities didn't dominate the conversation. And that we had a rather large board for our company, very comfortable with the size we had because it worked. I mean, it's not about size; it's about do you have a level of diversity, and I guess what I would say, strong inclusion in the meetings. And it takes a lot for the chair to be able to manage that well, and Mac did it very well. The other thing I would say is when we started on the journey of diversifying the board, and when I first became CEO, I would say we had a board of my parents or maybe grandparents, and there was only one woman on the board, and I would say she felt like a token, and I think she was, to be honest, treated like one. And so we started, my intent was we needed a board that could take the company where it was going, not where it had been. And, not one that came in and told the stories about the old days, but really was focused on something new. And when you do that, if you've got a clear direction for the company and it's a direction that is about reaching beyond the horizon, it's a lot easier. It just is kind of a natural follow-on to say we need a diverse group of people to be able to help support what management's trying to do. Mm-hmm. And so we started there. It was not about getting the numbers right or the ratios right. And Tamara, it goes back to what you said when you started. It wasn't, you didn't start with that goal in mind. You had bigger reasons to do it, but it kind of naturally takes you there. And I would just say for those of you who are watching, that's something when you're evaluating a board, is it the importance of not just getting on the board or getting on a board. It's about really evaluating the CEO and the board chair and understanding where they're taking the company, and do you want to go there with them, and do you think you can have something to bring to it?
Great. Thank you, Mark. In the past, boards have been built through personal relationships where often like attracts like. I think about, you mentioned the only one woman on the board. A natural thing is for the other members on the board to reach out to people like them. And you have to be very intentional to disrupt that. So I'd love to, turn to you, Karen, and say, does it still happen today where like attracts like, or how do you see this playing out, and how do you engage individuals in your network to help them see themselves as board members?
So I do think that like attracts like, and I think people are working to become more inclusive in their approach to board member selection. And however, these are small groups of people, and relationships are really important. And so it's not necessarily a terrible thing that it's a relationship to get considered, but the bad part about it is that it makes the pot smaller. So for me, I first try to, with the boards that I am on, I try to support the nominating process for board members. And every board has its own personality, its own culture, its own way of doing things. On one of my boards, I'm the chair of the nominating committee, and on the other, I'm not, but I'm free to participate. So I'm allowed to, they don't, and so I fully participate in that process, and I give my opinion, and I know that it will be considered. So one thing is working with the board that you're on to make sure that their process is one that's inclusive, and that issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, as it comes to board member selection, that those are considered. Then with my network, first of all, it's important for me to kind of, to reach out to people that look like me and say, are you interested? And some will say yes, and some will say not now, or some will say no. And then if they are interested, to help get them involved with a board mentor opportunity. We have several. I live in Seattle. There are a couple different ways to engage with, I would call the mentorship community, and that's always step one. Because then it's more than just me that can be the mentor. It's the entire community, and then to and then to just be available for people as people have been available for me in the past.
Thank you, Karen. Tamara, I'd love your take on this question. Do you still see boards being built through relationships, or are there other factors at play?
Well, I think it's an interesting question. I think it's how you define relationships, because I think Karen's exactly right regarding networking. But if you look back to the days before Sarbanes-Oxley, relationships actually were, I think one of the primary ways, if not the majority way, in which you got on a board. My guess is, and I haven't done the statistics, but my guess is that executive recruiting firms were used much less, and your personal network, and going back to college, going back to your first job, going back to your fraternity, going back to your sports team, going back to your clubs, that was where you sought your board directors. I know for my own company, when I got on the board, I believe that everyone on that board actually had known each other before they got on the board. And so it was a 1 degree, 2 degree type of process. Today, if you look at our board, I don't think anyone on our board had a prior relationship before they got on the board. Now they've got great relationships with the people that they've met on the board. But Sarbanes-Oxley really raised the bar and actually required the standard of independence. And so actually personal relationships you need to overcome to get on public company boards versus they were the path forward before, as I said, before Sarbanes-Oxley. So I think that it is important to create a network. If you're looking to get on a board, you've got to have your profile available, accessible, so that you're caught in the net when executive recruiters go out looking to fill a position. And I think that boards now, I'd be surprised if executive recruiters weren't used 95% of the time in order to make sure, one, you're looking as broadly as possible. Two, you've got that intermediary making sure that you can say you have looked broadly and the search is an independent one, and you're bringing in an independent director. So I think that network is different than relationships, and I think the way you think about relationships is not at all the desired path forward because of the independence requirement.
That's a
Interesting,
great perspective.
Yeah, Peggy, I just wanted to add one thing. I think that because the network kind of gets your foot in the door, but that board will still have some type of search process. The other thing that I would just want to say is, so I went to United States Military Academy at West Point, and we had a reunion of the women, and all of the women that were directors went through a process where there was an independent search firm, and they were interviewed like they were interviewing for a job. So Tamara's exactly right that process is becoming more and more the standard.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you for that. I want to switch gears and talking about how people are selected for board service to what boards are looking for. And Mac, I'll turn to you because you've served on many boards, and based on your experience, what are boards looking for when they seek to recruit new directors? What types of skills, background, experiences are most valuable?
Peggy, before I get to the skill and qualifications part, let me say this, that any good board, the first thing you do before you start recruiting is you do an inventory of what you need for the company to be effective or the board to be effective. And then once you have developed that inventory, you overlay that with your existing board to see what skill sets they have and so on. And from that, you can get a sense of the gaps, where are the needs? And that drives the selection. But if you think about the skills and qualifications, I would put them in two categories. The first category is very deep technical skills and qualifications. And the second one is general skills and qualifications. And underneath that, an example of a deep technical skill is a chief financial officer type. Someone who is legal, an attorney, or deep in the manufacturing. But once you take a look and do a cut on general and deep technical, you take a look at what the needs of the organizations are, and if you're technical, you're going to get some opportunities depending on what industry or what sector that is. But if you're general, don't be dismayed by that, because a good board is going to have diversity. And I think Mark mentioned this earlier, that it's a diversity of skills, attitudes, and so on. So someone who has C-suite experience, someone who has, executive level experience, someone who understands strategy, understands governance, understands policy, understands how a business operates, is qualified to serve on most boards. And so I think those are the factors that good boards look for, is someone who fits within those two categories. And within that category, they look at things, and at the top of that list should be things like diversity, gender diversity, racial diversity, age diversity, and so on, and people who think differently, maybe sector diversity, someone who comes from a different sector than the industry that they're representing, and anyone that gets on a short list to be on a board, I mean, you're more than qualified. The question is, where can you make that contribution, and how do you make it? Do you make it in a deep technical area, or do you make it in a very general area? And so I would encourage someone to not just focus on, what is my occupation at this point. It's the question is, what are your skill sets? How broad are they, and can you represent some of those broader general skills or technical skills in a company?
Thanks, Mac. That's great advice, and it reminds me of Sujay's answer to her personal story. Was that she was recruited to the Intel board for her technical expertise, but also because she had general leadership skills. So really very helpful advice there, Mac. Thank you. Our time is running short. We have about 10 minutes left. So I want to pivot now to ask you about how board diversity benefits a company. And Sujay, I'll start with you here. Have you seen changes in Intel's board or company culture or decision-making processes that you would attribute to having a more diverse board?
Yeah, certainly. I'll make it short because of the time. For sure, as Max said earlier, I think the women on the board at Intel do feel much more comfortable, at least in my view, speaking up during the board meetings. I mean, I think it makes a difference if you have more than one on the board, but also the diversity of the leadership in the company. I think certainly gender diversity has improved. I think it's probably related to the fact that the board diversity has increased. But I think it also makes a huge difference who the chairman of the board is. So you can see, from Mac's comments that, I'm sure he's made a huge difference, right, in the culture of the board and getting women to contribute. So I think, just seeing the diversity of perspectives being heard and respected and valued, that's the biggest benefit of having a diverse board.
Great, thank you. And Mark, is there anything you would offer in terms of the benefits of the diversity on the company as a whole?
I think it's one of the keys to driving innovation in a board. If you build diversity and do inclusion well with that's substantive to the strategy of the company and not just about getting the numbers right, if you will. But if you really are trying to innovate toward the future, I don't think you can't do it without a highly diverse board that's going to be challenging management every step of the way. In a supportive way, by the way, but still challenging.
Yeah, Peggy, I would just like to add, that boards don't take the place of excellent management teams that are doing the lion's share of the strategic work, just all the work. We are really there to assist and support and make sure that that they've thought about things and they've thought about different opportunities. But at the end of the day, if companies are management led, unless they are really struggling, and thank goodness I'm not on a company like that, and my companies are tremendously successful. So the diversity of thought, I think, is the most important thing. And I happen to be a person of color, that I think that my experience is different from both of the boards that I'm on, and I just relish that role, just to make sure, did you think about this? And they normally did, but it's just important to still, just make sure that management has really not gotten tunnel vision. So that's how we can assist.
Yeah, that's great. Now we have 5 minutes left, and I want to close with this question, and that is, what is one piece of advice you would give to someone who has not yet served on a corporate board but would like to? Tamara, I'll start with you.
Okay, I'll try and make this short. So I think the first thing that you have to do is to determine why you want to be on a board and whether it's the right time in your career. So you just heard Karen say that the role of a board member isn't to run a company. The role of a board member is to provide guidance, is to provide challenging questions, is to weigh in on strategy. But if the management team is doing well, then there's always a phrase, you're wildly overpaid until you're underpaid. And that's what a board is there for. A board is there to, be there to catch when there's a problem. And so you've got to find out whether you're at the right time in your career, because it is a time commitment. And when a board needs to have a meeting, or when a committee needs to have a meeting, you need to be available for that. And so it's not for everyone all the time. I would say that once you figure out those two questions, then you need to make sure that you've created your network and your exposure so you can be caught by the search net. And then you need to determine what your set of skills or expertise are that you'll be bringing to management, to that board. And then if you're lucky enough to have options, figuring out what your priorities are in terms of what you want to take away.
Thank you for that. Mac, what one piece of advice would you give?
I think after the advice from Tamara, I would say get prepared. Once you know why you want to be on a board, and by the way, if you want to be on a board to make money and status, and then don't do it.
Right.
But once you decide why you want to be on a board, get prepared. And there are boutique organizations that are springing up all over the place that are preparing women and people of color for board experience. 50/50 is a great organization. There's another organization that I'm an advisor on called Board Ready. And have these organizations get you prepared. Get prepared for the job. I think we're in an environment now that if you build it, they will come. And shareholders are expecting and demanding that boards become more diverse. And you just need to get prepared and rely on these organizations. But if you get the opportunity, I would say do your research before you take the leap. And if you take the leap, then do your homework and work hard to be on the board. That's my advice.
Thank you, Mac. Sujay, anything you'd offer in terms of one piece of advice?
I think Tamara and Mark covered it really well. I'd just like to point out that some of the programs that are designed for board of directors members also take people who are not yet on boards. And so I've met a lot of people at these programs who are interested to serve on boards. So don't necessarily limit yourself to programs like Board Ready that are designed for people who want to be on boards. go ahead and look for opportunities to attend programs for people who are already on boards.
Good point. Good point.
Thank you. Karen, what's your advice?
I would add on to everything that's been said before and said, be ready to love another company. So, employees go to work and they might work for a company for 30 years. And their retirement is tied up in a company, and their stock options are tied up in a company. So you have tremendous responsibility to support management and help that company be as successful as possible. And for those of us that have a day job in a day company, we love our companies. But what you have to be prepared for is, oh my gosh, you can actually love another company in addition to your own. And I think that you learn a lot, but you also, you have to like the industry, and you have to really love the organization and the direction that it's going.
That's such good advice. And I think it really dovetails with what Max said about knowing your why. Why do you want to be on that board? And making sure that it's consistent with your values as well. So thank you for that. Mark, you will get the last word here. What's your one piece of advice for someone who wants to serve on a board?
My one piece of advice in 3 parts, and it will be very tactical. First off, ask for help from your own company. Don't be afraid to go to your CEO or one of the senior leaders and say you want to serve on a nonprofit board, and have them help guide you to a nonprofit board in your community that I would call, there's kind of A level, B level, C level nonprofit boards in terms of the makeup of them. And so balance working for a nonprofit that you really, that speaks to your heart, but also if you look at the board, it includes some really experienced corporate leaders, for example. But ask for help inside the company. Secondly, really think about nonprofit board service. You can learn a great deal from that, and that can help prepare you for a later jump to corporate boards. And will actually provide you, if you will, some resume background that you can point to. And when you're on that board, really lean in and, play big on that board, because nonprofits need help and they need guidance. And so that's how it's a great way to learn how to be a good governor from the board perspective. And then finally, a good jump from a nonprofit board to a corporate board is think about a smaller company, a startup. Serving on a board of a smaller private company can be great experience for eventually serving on a public company board.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much. Karen, thank you. Tamara, thank you. Mac, thank you. And Sujay, thank you. You all shared such wonderful pearls of wisdom with our audience, and it's greatly appreciated. Now I'll turn it back over to Pamela.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for such an amazing discussion and such great insights. I really love some of the gems that you shared, from how board service can make you a better leader, to the fact that diversity is key to driving innovation, but also importantly, that diversity without inclusion is not truly meaningful. I know that all of our attendees are going to take these gems away. Now, let's take those into our breakout session so we can continue the conversation. We have some incredible director coaches who are waiting for you in the breakout rooms and are here to share your knowledge with you. They have deep board experience, and I really want to thank each of them for being here today and giving up both their time and their talent. I'm going to take a moment now to explain how to join your breakout room. But first, and probably most importantly, remember, if at any time you are having any technical issues, you can use the Help Center in EventMobi, or send an email to events@5050wob.com. Now, let's go to the breakout. First, you're going to look to the left side of your screen and click My Agenda. On your agenda, you should see your breakout room. All you have to do is click that session and then hit Join Now. The breakouts are going to take place using the Zoom platform, and the transition should be seamless as long as you have Zoom on your device. Now, we won't be coming back together into our larger group after the breakout, so I want to take this time on behalf of my co-chair, Peggy McGuire, and our Portland leadership team to thank everyone again for being here with us today. Be well.